Yeah. So here's how I would recommend anyone start, right? Like, so here, our strategy, like I said, our website's up to date. We have our long form content drops once a week. And then I do 10 pieces of short form social content 2 times per day, 5 days a week. That's aggressive. And if, like you said, you're a solo guy in the middle of nowheresville, right? Or somewheresville, but you have your 7 volunteers and you're like, there's ain't no way. What I recommend is like just try starting with 3, right? 3 reels, 3 shorts, 3 TikToks, whatever platform you want to use in your context. And if you can't get a clip of your message, then just do like a recap, a selfie style recap, and that can be like one
Really, but yeah, Nick, we got the early podcast going today, the 7 a.m.
Yeah,
where we're at. So okay, I'm up in Kansas City. Where are you coming from?
Man, that's a loaded question. All right, like I'm from everywhere. But right now I live in DFW, Dallas, Texas. But that's not home. That's not where I'm from by like any means. I grew up like I was born in Wisconsin, lived in Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. All those 4 states, all the way up until about 2 years ago when I moved here. So this is like foreign territory. But
Yeah,
so
I feel like they won't
always
like you with
say
all
like
your.
I'm from the
you're
Midwest,
thundered out.
but do what?
I feel like I said you're thundered out. I feel like Dallas wouldn't like that.
No, they wouldn't. I'm very much in enemy territory down here. And me and our like students worship guy, like we have a wager, even though we're Christians, on the game tonight. So we'll see how it goes.
There we go. I love that. Okay, so you're from all over the place, Midwest at heart.
Yep.
I guess I don't really count Texas as the Midwest from
being
a true Midwestern.
And it's not the South either, because like when you say South, that's like Alabama, Georgia. So like Texas is its own, and they would like to keep it this way. It's its own entity. Like it's not the South. It's not Southwest. It's just Texas.
I love that. Okay, so you're living in Dallas. You got to give us a couple. I've actually never been to Dallas. I've only flew through the airport. But if I go, I need to know what is the Dallas food spot that you're like, if I'm going to come down and see you, where are we going?
That's a good question. It depends what your taste is, right? Because like I could take you to quote like a good barbecue spot. Is that what you want? Is that what you like? So we can always try a good barbecue spot. So if we wanted to go barbecue, we could go to like the original Roy Hutchins. But that's not everyone's like cup of tea, And so like the 2 things that Dallas is, or even just Texas in general, is known for is obviously barbecue and Tex-Mex, So we could go to either of those places, but if you want like, and this is like the most touristy thing you can think of, but if you want the most just like you feel like you went to Texas, and like specifically I live in Fort Worth, right? So if you want to feel like you went to Fort Worth, then we need to go to the stockyards, which is where they do the cattle drive 2 times a day, and you watch literal longhorns walk past you. Like, that's only tourists go there, but you feel like you did something when you went to Texas that day.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm not a huge cowboy. I do have 1 pair of cowboy boots.
That's more than me,
I do have a cowboy hat. I have some bibs. I'm actually discovered recently working in my yard that I'm more of a bib guy.
There you go.
So maybe I'm more country than I thought.
How long have you been in Kansas City?
I have been in Kansas City I'm born and raised here. But
okay.
I went to Kansas State University, so that's like 2 hours from here.
Nice.
Did I really leave? Manhattan, Kansas. Great place.
Yeah.
Shout out to all my Wildcats.
Are you a Chiefs fan?
I'm a huge Chiefs fan. So,
yeah.
And they just keep winning.
It's a good era for you, man. It's a good era.
Great. Yeah. This season's been an anxious, fun season.
Yeah.
But Nick, why don't you tell me a little bit? What got you into ministry, dude? How long have you been doing this? Give us a little bit of the journey into ministry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I grew up in church. My dad was a pastor, and so like in and around ministry, essentially my whole life. Is it true
that they say that PK kids are the most crazy?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure.
You just gotta be sneaky about it.
I don't think I was crazy, but I had siblings, right? So they can share their story.
That's good.
But yeah. So I grew up in and around church, and then about 8th grade, I felt like a call to ministry, if you will. Like I was at a summer camp, and I just really felt like God was like telling me, like, "Yo, like I want you to. Will you say yes to whatever I ask?" And so like at that time, I thought okay, yeah, like he's gonna ask me to go somewhere overseas or somewhere super like far and foreign. Um, and so I said, yes, God, like I'll go anywhere. Just don't send me anywhere like super like crazy or super like third world, like without running water, you know? And so, I, I sort of gave him like a yes with a caveat. And so over time, God kind of like worked that out of me through like different experiences and mission trips and stuff like that. Went to Bible college. Honestly, went to Bible college with the idea and goal of getting like a just like a pastoral degree. So like I said, my dad is in ministry, and he was a youth pastor, like a many year, like 20 plus year veteran, like youth pastor. And so I thought I'll probably start out in youth ministry, and if I have any questions, I'll just call him, and then I'll go get this degree over here, in something else. And then, man, I got in it 14 years ago, and I've been doing youth ministry ever since. Still haven't gotten out, you know.
It's
So
amazing.
yeah, I don't have like a declaration of like I will never leave, but I see the value in it, you know, like I believe in the church. And then of course, like while in the church, I believe that the next generation is the most like ripe like harvest field. And so I'm like, why would I be anywhere else? Like aside from this. So
Man, 14 years in youth ministry. Do you have like an iconic story, like a youth ministry chronicles, like something where that you go to? You're like, I cannot believe, like, I just feel like, I've been doing this almost a decade, so I'm like, man, this like you just collect insane stories
yeah.
of like ridiculous scenarios that
Yeah.
you're like, never
Man.
have I ever been at Top Golf and another kid hit another kid in the head with a golf club.
You know,
That's one of my
I've been
stories.
really fortunate. Like I haven't had a lot of like crazy like hospital stories or whatever, and I've never been the guy to make people like, drink weird blended stuff. Like that just was never really like my
That's
vibe.
good.
So,
Yeah, I'm out on that. I'm out on the messy games as well. I got
yeah,
traumatized
so
one
I don't know,
time.
man. Like I had like a really hard like camp story one night where just like me and my leaders, we just like we had like a year worth of like conflict that was like under the surface, and it all boiled and bubbled over like the last night of camp. Like that was gross and like difficult, and I was up till like 3 a.m. just like putting out like fire after fire after fire. So like, that's not a like clippable youth ministry chronicles, like let people laugh at it. People just feel bad when they hear that one. But I learned a lot from that night, and yeah, like I never want to do do that again. So, but yeah,
Man, nothing. You've never taken like 80 middle schoolers to like a theme park?
no, never.
Man,
Well, I
man,
have, but I
oh
didn't
man,
lose
go
any of them.
just yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so
Just
that's the thing.
sprinkle some more of
Like I
that
said,
stuff
I've
in.
just
That's
been
when it gets good.
fortunate. Yeah, where I just had like the mechanism in place to be like, just don't get lost and don't be an idiot, and so
Maybe
we were good.
that's probably a reflection of your discipleship ability that you're like, no, actually my kids are pretty solid.
I don't know about that. I think I've just been lucky.
I love that. Okay, so tell me a little bit about what you're doing now. Like, where's your church? Like,
Yep.
what's your role? How long
Yeah.
you been there? And then just give us a little breakdown. What is it that you guys do,
Yeah.
especially in terms of student ministry?
Yeah, man. So, like I said, DFW Dallas area in a town called Colleyville. It's right next to Grapevine, Texas, which Grapevine is where like the DFW airport is located. So, from like my church's front door, I could probably get to like drop someone off at a gate at the airport in like 11 minutes.
Oh, that's awesome.
And
Yeah,
so
I live like an
that's
hour from the airport, and it's like,
yeah.
that's
Yeah,
awesome.
well, but listen, like I'm a youth pastor, so I fly Southwest, which makes me an hour from that airport from where I live. So like it's not that like
Okay,
advantageous as it sounds. Like don't
makes
forget,
sense.
I'm still a youth pastor. But yeah, so we're right like in the middle between Dallas and Fort Worth. A small for Texas church, I would say. But I'm on a team of uh there's like a handful of other like people on like quote youth staff, and so like I have a boss, he's the lead youth pastor, and they brought me in. I'm like his number two or whatever. And honestly, we're every church in America. Like we have Sunday morning small groups, and we have Wednesday night like quote traditional youth group. um and all the things that you can like think of that go into it. But I would say probably like the advantage that I had of being like able to work for this guy was I came in, and like my whole goal when I got here, because like we worked together, both him and I, we worked together back in Chicago. So he took the job here first, and then I came and wanted to work with him. And so when I got here, we had done COVID together in Chicago. And like I personally think what we did was one of the most creative youth ministry solutions I saw during COVID. Like we ran this full like YouTube shows completely live streamed, I guess I should say. But then at one point we did actually shoot it live, like live studio audience style, and everything like that. And so that was pretty cool. And then we used that actually to like distribute and disseminate out to like host home small groups distributed all throughout the South Chicagoland area, which I thought was awesome. And I thought was like an infinitely scalable model, especially because anyone can have access to YouTube, like on a smart TV. So all they got to do is like watch our stuff, watch our lesson, and then just like start discussing it, and so we were never capped out by space. We were never capped out by day of the week. Like people could meet whenever, wherever they wanted. And so like as COVID sort of like wrapped up, obviously a lot of us were like tired of anything online and anything digital. And so there was a tension or a pull to just kind of like go back to what was normal, what was familiar, like back in the room. And so, and then sort of all in that is when he felt like led to come down here. I came just a couple months later. And so when we came here, I felt like it was sort of like a reset and a restart to try and like make digital like happen, but in like a regular place, not with like COVID restrictions, you know what I mean? Not with like decentralized host home models, which is like a pretty like it's been done by other youth ministries before, but even like guys I'd talked about who'd been doing it for like a while and were sort of like champions of it, we're kind of going away from it and kind of bringing everyone back to the building. I felt like COVID had this sort of like major reset. And so the question I sort of asked myself and the advantage I had to be able to like have the margin, to focus on it because he was the boss. So he got to like deal with like the problems and the cranky parents. And then like, I just was like, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to figure out YouTube. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to figure out social media and I'm just going to like, overhaul this place and make it like hybrid, which is the word that like I use. And so like I have this kind of podcast on the side. And so honestly, my podcast is just me ruminating on and discussing and talking about ideas and things that I see in like our own context that we've been beta testing and just, figuring out kind of from the beginning of our and my tenure, like at this church, so that's really what we've been working on. So we have all the regular like amenities that you can imagine in like a youth ministry Wednesday night. So there's worship and there's a game and there's students serving and there's a tech booth and there's small group and small group leaders and all those things. But in all of that, we're always trying to ask the question, like, how can we have a digital component of this, or how can we make this quote like hybrid? And so that's really what I've been working on. I've been here about 2 years now, and
cool.
that's sort of been my main focus since I've been here.
Nice. And Nick, what's the name of your church?
Yeah, it's called Cross Creek Church.
Cross Creek. So
yeah,
you're like the Cross Creek Youth Online guy.
Yeah, Cross Creek Students is like our handle for everything, and crosscreekstudents.com. So yeah.
Okay. Hey, real quick, I just want to say thank you so much for listening and watching this podcast, wherever it is, on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're watching this. And I just want to ask a big personal ask of you. And that is, one, if you are watching this and you're not subscribed, to please hit the subscribe button so that you can stay up to date on upcoming content coming your way, resources, videos, trainings, all those things. It does our show a huge service if you like the episode, if you subscribe, and please, if this is helpful for you, share it with a friend, someone in ministry, another youth leader, another youth pastor. That's how we grow this in order to impact and encourage more leaders in ministry. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so you're on a team, so you have somebody who's like a youth pastor at your location.
That's it. Yep.
And you're kind of a co-youth pastor where your bread and butter is this hybrid online stuff. Correct?
Yeah. And not because I'm good at it, but because I think it's necessary. So like I still teach, I still recruit volunteers, but like if anyone has like a question or like I teach something or other, they're like, hey, we got to talk to Nick. So yeah, that's kind of like become my lane apparently.
Well, you probably are good at it, and that's probably why they've made the investment. But that's pretty cool. I mean, I'm just thinking through from the standpoint of your church, like that speaks a lot to your leadership to say like, hey, we not only do we believe in like the next generation, but we understand where like the world is going.
Yeah.
And that we've got to figure digital out. Like we have to figure out like how many hours a day, are kids on this thing or in front of a screen or anyone. I'm like, my screen time's like 4 or 5 hours a day.
Yeah. And that might be low for the average person,
Yeah. Like I just wanted to hear from you a little bit. Like what got you passionate?
Yeah.
Outside of the necessity of COVID, like you shared.
Yeah.
Like I think everyone's like, everyone's dabbling with a YouTube stream and how do we drop questions in the chat and, and it was cool because anybody could do it. You have an iPhone, you could do it. You have an iPad, whatever. But like now that as we're kind of through that, what's got you excited and passionate? And when you what's your vision for online digital, hybrid ministry?
Yeah.
I'd love to just hear like, why are you're like, we got to figure this out.
Yeah. Good question. So I would say even pre-COVID, like I was reading books and listening to studies and stuff like that, and they're just talking about the amount of time that teenagers at that time, Generation Z, like was spending on screens and spending on social media. And, you got to realize like digital is still very much in its infancy, like it's, Instagram's been around now just over 10 years, right? It's like 12 years, 13 years, something like that. YouTube's like 15 years, and it wasn't even really like considered a social platform, until much more recently.
Yeah.
And so
I'm 30 and I remember getting Instagram right at the end, like spring semester, my senior year of high school.
Yeah.
As I remember when at first I was like, ooh, Instagram, cool. It's like Facebook with just pictures.
Yeah. And it was different. It was kind of like a spot for, people that didn't want to be on Facebook anymore, were on their crazy aunt posting political memes. And so they go to Instagram instead. Yeah. And so I remember, Instagram was 2012, which was right when I hopped in, or 2011, I think. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, right around when I hopped in to being a youth pastor at Bible college and stuff like that. So yeah, so I was like, we got to figure this out. And so I've always had some presence on social media, but obviously it's grown and evolved. And so then I started a new job. Like the part of my story that we didn't really get to, haven't really talked about, is like I started this job in Chicago the first day of COVID. Like no joke, my first day in the office was March 16th, and that was the day that everyone got sent home indefinitely. And that was also the day that we recorded our very first like version of this online youth ministry thing. We called it, at that church, we called it Unscripted. And so it was the first day of filming Unscripted, but like I was just the new guy. And so I wasn't on camera or anything. I was just in the studio observing. And they're like, yeah, no one knows you yet. So like, just kind of sit here. And I was like, okay. And so that ushered this thing in. And then, kind of like I said, the tension I thought was like, everyone got tired of it. Like the novelty wore off, and everyone had been online. And once like summer of 2020 hit, I remember a person on my team back in Chicago said, the only place that people aren't experiencing anything in person anymore is church. We're at a pretty large church. And so like coming back to the room, even if we would have like ignored governor restrictions or anything like that would have been a big PR like no for us, right? Like I hate to say it that way, but
Chicago was crazy.
Yeah, no doubt. And and there was a lot of opinions, right? Like on all the sides of the thing of what we should do. And so
right. Yeah.
But we knew like our students needed an in-person moment, and so we came back in person before anyone else in the church did, the student ministry did, because we could stay. I think at the time restrictions were like 15 and under. So we just capped small group signups at 15 per house. And that was that, so as long as everyone showed up, we were within the range that was allowed. And we only let, people who are comfortable with it, whatever, like open their house. And so that really ushered in this whole thing. And I realized I saw there, because I was at a relatively large campus that was already going to be strapped for space. Like if all the students come back, putting them in small groups was really hard because there really wasn't good small group like breakout space. And so I saw this thing. I was like, dude, these houses are like an infinite model. Like we could have 100 of them, and we could have one on every single night of the week. So it can like jive with a student's schedule. If they have gymnastics like on Wednesday, it doesn't matter. They can sign up for a group that meets on Thursday. Like there's no cap on how we do and what we do, And so, like I said, that again, all the wave of that sort of wore off. Everyone started to come back quote like normal, or at least like before. But I was like, there's something here. There's an opportunity to this. And when I came here to Texas, I just realized like we can't just throw all the baby out with the bathwater. You know what I mean? Like this screen and digital like native. I think I was on a Barna Zoom cohort about a year ago, and they had a quote that said, "This generation of teenagers, they're no longer just digitally native; they're digitally dependent. Like this is their life. This is what they do." And there's wisdom. Like we got to measure, the balance, and we got to teach them digital hygiene and like all these things. But this is not a foreign concept. And it was right when I moved here, Barna dropped this ebook that was like the 6 questions about the future of the hybrid church. And so, the lowest age they could go on in that was Generation Z legally to obtain like their information, their, survey results. But Gen Z, millennials, and we can infer most likely Generation Alpha as well. Those two subcategories said like a hybrid church would suit me well going forward. And like that quote is just not haunted me, but like it's really stuck with me.
Wow.
Because what we've seen even since that drop of that ebook is like millennial church attendance is in person is actually up. But they still see and view like a digital expression or a digital version or a digital access point to their church as beneficial. And I really think like most churches have like digital streaming or something like that as like the only way that they're thinking about that. But the reality, in my opinion, is like the sky's the limit on creativity. Like the more that we can offer, I think the more that millennials, Gen Z would lean in and actually consume some of this stuff, because it's where they're living, it's where they're spending their time, on their phones, on social, on YouTube, on, fill in the blank, whatever area, whatever platform. And so I think it's incumbent upon us as churches just to figure it out and to stop ignoring it and trying to do church like, we did in the 90s. So
yeah, I'm curious, how did Barna describe hybrid when they and how would you describe it? Because I know it's like kind of part of your brand. It's kind of part of what you're pioneering.
Yeah.
When you say the word hybrid ministry, like just define that for me, for listeners.
Yeah, so I don't know how Barna defined it necessarily, and it was still pretty loosey-goosey because it was still coming out of COVID, and so everyone had different ideas of it. But for me, I use a word picture. Okay, so Ryan, do you ever go to Home Depot?
I have been to Home Depot recently. Yeah.
Do you like it?
It's fine.
Yeah, right.
Depends on which old guy's working. Like if there's like a real fun one, I'm like, okay. If there's one who's like, hey buddy, I know you're doing this because you're retired, but you actually don't know where the screws that I need are. Then I'm a little disappointed. But yeah, it's okay.
Right.
Yeah,
okay. So here's
fine.
Yeah. So here's how it is with Home Depot.
6 out of 10.
Yeah. So here's how it goes with Home Depot, right? So you can experience Home Depot in a multitude of ways, right? You can walk in there on a Saturday and just browse the aisles because you're bored. Most of us wouldn't want to do that, but we could. We could just show up and experience Home Depot in all of its glory for its in person, right? Or we could go online and we could order it and we could have it all shipped directly to our house and never even step foot inside of a Home Depot. Or my favorite way to experience Home Depot, to avoid the old guy interaction, by the way, is to get into Home Depot, pull open my app, and look up the exact thing I'm looking for, and it will guide me directly to the aisle and to the bay, right? And so that expression right there, I'm experiencing it digitally, right? But I'm also there in person. And that's sort of that hybrid sort of melding. And so what does that mean for churches? I mean, could it be like digital ways to take notes? Could it be, like podcasts where you're like expounding upon the sermon? At a very minimum, like your church's live stream in like sort of either audio podcast, live stream form, or like what we've landed on in our student ministry is we actually sit down direct to camera and film like videos for YouTube, telepromptered, 10 to 12 minutes long, highly edited, like a type of video that you would see and find on YouTube, hoping and trying to answer specific questions that teenagers might have. Not only for our current teenagers in our room, but maybe hopefully some kid logs onto YouTube and they search a question about life, faith, God, eternal matters, and our video is served to them because we've done a little bit of our homework and research on what keywords are being searched and stuff like that. And so That's really kind of what I mean. And like I said, I have our version of it. Like I have how we're doing it in our student ministry, but the sky's the limit on creativity, on what you can do, and how you can serve not only your people, but maybe potentially even other people around the world as they're asking questions about life, God, and faith.
Cool. I love that. I mean, because there's an internal component to what you're doing. Like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
we're our roles to disciple and and raise up and train, and the students and the people that we have.
Yeah.
But it's also to go out and go reach others who are
Yeah.
way outside of our context
Yeah.
missionally. So you're kind of thinking it from two ends. I love that.
Yeah.
I would love to hear you just break down
Yeah.
what is it you're doing now, and we'll just get under the hood a little bit. Like when
Let's
it
do
comes
it.
to this hybrid stuff, like what are you cooking on at your church?
Yeah.
Because I think that's most relevant to everyone, and even to me, because I'm gonna be the first to admit, like we have a really killer in-person program, and we do a great job with that. But like online, like we really struggle, and we need
Yeah.
to figure out a strategy at even at my local church. So
Yeah.
what is it that you guys are doing now? And then I'd love to hear a little bit about what you're dreaming about. That you're like, we're not
Yeah,
doing this
man.
yet, but this is where I think the future's going.
Yeah. Okay, so like keep in mind this is youth ministry specific. So like we have an entire communications team for our church, and they're not thinking necessarily this same way. Like they're still trying to be active online, stuff like that. But so for me, the first thing I tell anyone, youth pastors, otherwise, like you got to make sure your website's up to date. I can't tell you how many youth ministry or even church websites I get on, and it's not even up to date. So like your
Yeah.
website should be a place that someone can go to with a question and get an answer, and it shouldn't be hard to figure out. But in a lot of cases, that is. So, first step, lock in your website. And in some cases, that might be all on you. Like, yo, you got to figure out the website builder and you got to get in there and find a way to keep it up to date. If you're in a larger context where you have like a communications team, then you need to become a squeaky wheel to find a way to either A, let them give you editing access, or B, you make them do that job so that it stays up to date.
What in your opinion I love that. I'm just curious because I've looked at like a million church websites over the years and they all kind of look the same, but some of them are very, very different.
Yeah.
Like, I know churches who their youth ministry has their own website.
Yeah.
That's different than the church website. I know
Yeah.
a lot like ours, we have one church website. They're very controlled.
Yep.
I'm not trying to say that the person who runs the communication department's controlling because she's my wife. I probably shouldn't. I should be careful how I say that. No, but she just likes things how it is, and she does a great job. But so they're like, we're not giving keys to anyone. So I know one of the things that, like, and I know a lot of people run into this. They're just saying like, hey, like I don't have necessarily the keys to like what my website looks like,
right?
But I can control the content. Like, what in your opinion are like these are the essentials? Like every youth ministry page, website, like these are the essential items that you need to have on your student ministry page. Like if I'm gonna email my wife, say, hey, yo, we need to update the page today. I talked to Nick.
Yeah.
These are the bullet points.
I mean, it's nothing like rocket science, right? But like you should have a calendar, right? So that like parents and students can get on there and know like, are you meeting tonight or not, and what time? And if a time changed, like that should be reflective of that individual night, right? If you are if you're like having like small group leaders or something like that, they should be able to get on your website and easily find their small group material somehow, some way, right? Like I guess what I'm trying to say is a lot of times we rely on ourselves to send an email like, hey, here's an email attachment with your small group lesson. Like what I've learned is we live in more of an on-demand type world. So when I get an email from one of my kids' teachers, that particular piece of information is not relevant to me at that moment in time. And so what do I do? What do all of us do? We ignore it. We leave it in our inbox. We'll get to it later. Well, then if time compounds, how many more times has my son's teacher emailed me? So which email was it? So now I'm like digging through all the emails, right? As opposed to like letting them know exactly like this is where you always go when you're looking for small group material, right? It's the difference between, I think a lot of churches live in a cable TV mentality where it's like you have to come at 6:30 p.m. on Thursday night to watch The Office. That's the only time. Where now it's like if you want to watch The Office, bro, just watch it whenever you want. and that's the world that people are living in. But as a church, we're still trying to operate in, like, if you want to hear the answer to God and faith, you got to come to church at 6:30. And so just permission slips, signups, like small group, like basic information. But I've, like you said, I've also seen a lot of church websites, and right now we're recording in December, but I might log into some church website and see an announcement for their Halloween party. That has clearly passed. Just get that off of there, right? So you just gotta, you gotta talk to your wife maybe about her updating it so that the information is at least just
She
current.
does a great job. She's a rock star.
Yeah,
she probably won't listen to this.
Shout out to your wife. Make sure you don't get in trouble. Yeah. So it's just that
I might give
stuff.
You some more things to add to the list of what we keep on the website though after this conversation.
Yeah, and I'm not saying like it needs to be about sleekness and design. Like if you have to play well and nice with your communications person, play well and nice with your communications person. See if you can get a calendar on there. See if you can get some resources to parents on there. See if you can get resources to small group leaders on there. If you're filming any of your long form content or you're making like audio podcasts, we'll get into that in just a second. Like, post a link to that on there so people can see it. Like, but it doesn't have to be anything wild and crazy, but just make sure that a normal person who's exploring your church gets on your website and it answers a question that they're going to have. And a good
like, what is it? When are we meeting? What are you talking about?
Exactly. And a good, you got probably most of us, again, when we're recording, we got Christmas coming up. So we're all taking a little bit of a break. Is that communicated? Like if Joe Schmo logged into your website and was like, yo, what's going on with the youth group here? Like, do they know? Yeah, we're not meeting this night and this night, but we'll be back this night. Just something simple, like try and serve people in that way. So
I do, maybe because this is most relevant to me, and I know that we have some other multi-siters listening.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any tips for that with multi-site?
Oh man,
it's tricky.
No.
Everybody I've talked to is like, do you let the campus have their own social media feed?
Yeah.
What happens if the more campuses? How do you keep it all like the information clear?
Yeah.
We bump into that a lot because we've 100%.
Yeah,
four
we were
locations
multi-site.
and one all Hispanic location. So it's like, any just tips or thoughts on streamlining digital hybrid stuff with multi-site?
Yeah, it just depends what you're doing. Are you like franchise model? So like everyone's preaching the same lesson, video piped in. So if that's the case,
we do live teaching everywhere, but it is the same content, but live teaching every week for students.
So if that's the case, like we haven't gotten yet to like under the hood of like what we're actually doing. Just this is just getting your website up to date. But if you do like capture the message at youth group or whatever, post clips from that individual message, and maybe you just rotate campuses, right? So like this week it's your campus, and next week it's the other campus, and so that way you get a diversity of voices, just like sprinkled in on your social feed. Or you could even go even more dynamic than that and be like, how many campuses do you have, Ryan?
We've got 4 physical, and then we have 1 Hispanic campus. Their Hispanic campus youth ministry sort of is merged with another one.
Yeah, so maybe if
we have 4 primary, like where there's our youth program we do Wednesday night youth programming.
Gotcha.
We have like middle school, high school youth programming happening at 4 different locations at the same time each week.
Yeah. So maybe if you want to be super democratic, you could be like, we're going to post 4 teaching clips after every single Wednesday, and it's going to be 1 from each campus. That's going to be hefty on whoever's running and managing that, but a lot of that's going to depend on your infrastructure and your like style and stuff like that. And then so moving on into the rest of our strategy, which might be able, I think, to inform, especially if you have like a centralized Instagram, for example. My goal is we
do, by the way, currently
centralized Instagram.
Yeah, we do currently, which has always been tricky with like event recaps and advertising, like, hey, come to this campus at all of your spots for this event.
Yeah. And so I think a website is even more important for y'all because you could advertise such and such night or such and such event, but then your call to action on the actual video is probably going to be more like, hey, check out the website for more information, right? And so the website has to actually distribute and disseminate the information, where the Instagram, I have a whole episode I shot back in the summer with one of my friends, and I said, stop promoting your events on social media. Like, no one's getting on social for that. They're getting on social to be inspired and entertained. And so entertain them and inspire them.
It's like you see an ad, you're like, skip.
Yeah, exactly. Or just your cooked up Canva graphic for the backyard barbecue. Like, they're just not getting on there to keep their calendar up to date, right? They're getting on there. Honestly, it's become an entertainment system. So find a way to hack into that. So the one thing that I tell people to do, I can send you a link to this. There's a bunch of different templates I use. You can toss it in the show notes if you want. But I do those like transition style videos. I'm sure everyone's seen the one where some poor intern gets chosen to be rammed in the back of their selves by a bull and has to dive into the row of chairs and invite everyone to church. But those are kind of hot right now. So like I found a bunch of different ones of those that are fun, and they're a super simple, easy way to invite someone to church. But if you got an event coming up, just shoot a few of those, and just say, come to our church and check out more info on the website. And then once they get to the website, hopefully the website is telling each individual campus or, whatever, where to go. And that's at least something that's fun, entertaining. People are going to laugh, but you're also getting you're announcing your event, but you're doing it in a way that's honoring to and leaning into the methods of why people get on social media in the first place. So
you said your quote is people get on social media for inspiration and entertainment. Give us a couple examples of some things that you've tried for both of those, and maybe talk through what would a healthy split be from your perspective of how much of your feed should be inspirational content, devotional content versus entertainment for fun.
Yeah, good question. So website number one. Number two, real quick, is long form. Your long form teaching, if you're able to, whether that's a live stream or whether that's a pre-recorded video of sorts, because I like that to be the anchor for the rest of my social content. All right. So like, let's say this week I'm talking on grace. So I sit down in front of camera, I pre-record a video, I send it off to an editor. And then I get it back, I post it. And that week I'm going to post in my like schedule, I'm going to post 3 teaching clips. So that's some inspiration, hopefully, right? I'm finding clips out of my 10 to 12 minute long, like long form talk, and I'm clipping them down and I'm posting those to social. I'm going to pair that though with, as you said, some hopefully entertaining content. And it's a little iffy, Ryan, because like part of our strategy as well is to get students creating content. And so sometimes they're not as interesting on camera as, some of us that are paid to be personalities can be. And so like there's a weighing of that, of like, I want students.
It might be interesting. It just might not be what you want to post.
Yeah. Or they just don't bring it because the camera's on and the lights are on. So what we do is we film every single week we meet on Wednesday night. We film what's called a social challenge. And so we do 4 different types of pieces of content with that. We do 2 that are like behind closed doors in like a studio. And those are like games. So a thing we do called like drafting stuff. And you can do an infinite number of categories of that. And then we play kind of like a guessing game called 7 questions. And then we do 2 other styles, which are like more like interview man on the street style. And then we just do those transition based videos where we go around and be like, hey, pretend you're getting rammed in the back by a bull and, invite someone to church or whatever. And so I'll sprinkle those all throughout. Like we try and film batch recording of those. We try and film anywhere from like 5 to maybe 8 of those any given Wednesday night. And then I actually have students come in early to youth group on Wednesday night, and they sit down and they edit on Adobe Premiere Pro on one of our spare computers. And they're my full-time like volunteer editors for everything we're doing on social at this point in time.
I like that.
Yeah, so we'll post. So it's honestly content shot by students, for students, and edited by students. Like it's pretty fun. Getting to where we are. So that's some of our fun, just hopefully entertaining type content. And so the theory is, right, like someone's scrolling through because they're on a discovery platform. 90% of the internet's traffic now, they're thinking is short form vertical based video. So they're scrolling through, they see one of our videos, they're hooked to it because they know that kid from school, maybe they're interested by the topic, or whatever the case might be, they watch it. So then the algorithm's going to serve them more of our content. And then some else of that content, right, is going to be some of our message clips. And then on those message clips, depending on where you're watching it, I'll have a little watermark that just says watch full video here over on YouTube. And so if they're on TikTok or if they're on Instagram, they're going to have to go manually kind of navigate to our YouTube. But if they're actually watching it on YouTube Shorts, there's a little button there called link related video. So I can post a short and link the related teaching video, and they can click right there and it'll take them to the full length video. And, I'm telling youth ministries and youth pastors, like, don't sleep on YouTube. Pew Research did a study a while back. 95% of teenagers are on YouTube. And there's been sort of like a breakdown, like a stratification of social where, like, boomers and Xers kind of landed as Facebook as their preferred platform, and sort of like millennials sort of settled in as Instagram, and Gen Z sort of settled in at TikTok. But we're looking and seeing that not millennials, Gen Alpha is settling in as YouTube as sort of their preferred platform. And so Gen Alpha's in our youth ministry now, they're the future. And so I think because we can post actual long form pieces of content to YouTube, that's what it was designed for in its original state. But now it's also introduced the concept of shorts. I just think it's a great platform. It's my preferred platform to kind of point youth pastors towards, and like, hey, just don't sleep on YouTube. It's got a lot of functionality, and they've introduced like podcasts. They have playlists. So we have like a free like baptism playlist course. So a kid who's interested in baptism, they can go in and watch a series of videos, and it's got like a link to like, hey, I'm interested in taking my next step. They can click the link. It takes them out to our, church community builder form and let us know, hey, I'm ready to take this next step. And then we'll schedule like an interview with them or whatever. And so really, like I've been saying, the sky is the limit. Those are some of the things I mean by hybrid. You know what I mean? Like just leaning into being like, hey, if you're interested in baptism, or you got questions about the Lord's Supper, or we've done like volunteer spotlight interview questions. We did like the Hot Ones wing style video where we interviewed students who are serving, trying to uptick our student serving sort of thing. So, but you can house sort of all of that on YouTube, and the nice thing is, back to the website conversation, YouTube's one of the friendliest social platforms with linking little like widgets or embedded videos onto church websites, and so you can highlight your series on your student ministry website, like this is the series we're in right now, or you can link certain playlists, like interested in baptism, and can link it over to like your YouTube baptism course, and just little things like that to help people who are landing on your website asking questions about God and faith. So
yeah, I love that. I mean, and I'm also thinking the resourcing it is for your leaders and your team, thinking through a leader's having a conversation with the student. Hey, I have some interest in baptism. I'm curious about this.
Yeah.
What a great opportunity. Like if you documented your baptism course, you're like, hey, leaders, we have a baptism course. It's going to be evergreen. It's going to be on there forever.
Exactly.
Until we decide to update it. Like, that's great. Why don't you guys just link up, go to Starbucks, watch through this, or meet up with their parent, watch a couple of the videos.
Yeah.
With three of you guys, watch the 5-minute video and then talk about it.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, that's a great resource for leaders, for your team. That's a great thing, obviously, for kids to consume, for parents. I recently had a parent, I felt a little convicted. He came up to me in the church lobby. He was like, hey, do you guys have any short form stuff, just like on different like hot button like topics? He's like, I was talking to my daughter. She's, excuse me. She's 8th grade. Just want to talk to her about some like modesty stuff.
Yeah.
And just kind of how to conduct herself. And he's like, do you have any like, little just talking points on that? Like a video. He's like, sometimes, just send her like a short or whatever. Like she might watch that versus me just blab at her.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't. But maybe we should, and that kind of got my gears spinning.
That's it.
So I mean, these are exactly reasons why, like, it's not just from a marketing standpoint, but it's or a branding standpoint. It's really it's also really powerful for discipleship. So
100%.
Do you have any stories on that of just like students that have interacted with discipleship content with some of the inspirational, but also some of the teaching things that maybe leaders that you'd like to share, just to share like, hey, this really practically does land with people.
Yeah, I mean, our baptism course is an awesome example because, right now, like one of our church's goals right now is to increase the number of, people getting baptized. So we recently, as a church, rethought our strategy. We were offering baptisms like 3 or 4 times a year on just arbitrary dates. Like no one really knew. So it was like, you're interested in baptism? I think there's a time in February, maybe, like just let us know. And then if that person's like, I got a soccer tournament that weekend, it's like, oh, sorry, I think the next one's in July. So, so that's been nice because our church is also helped by now offering baptisms once a month. And so that's a great example of one where it's like, or the modesty thing. Like those are both great examples of where like I've given kids a link to the baptism playlist, just texted it to them like, hey, watch through this, and if you have questions, let me know. And we've seen a drastic uptick, you know, in our baptisms. Or another story is there's this girl. She's one of our leaders. She's a rock star, but she couldn't make it some Wednesday night because she had soccer, you know. Tale as old as time. Every youth ministry ever has dealt with that. She goes, hey, can't make it. Super sad to miss all of y'all. She's like, but I will watch the video tonight on YouTube. And I just thought like it's really cool to be like, hey, there is an alternative. It's not just like, again, it's not cable TV where it's like if you have soccer, so sad, you have to choose between church or soccer. Like, yes, I know that like our YouTube video does not replace the community that she's missing out on. But I do know that she can still listen to the word of God on the internet. And I'm thankful at least for that. That someone like that she's still committed enough to be like, I will still catch up on this because I still want to hear this tonight. I still want to hear this lesson. I still want to hear this message. It's honestly, Ryan, has been a godsend to our leaders. So the way we break down our message, we do like a message on Wednesday night. And then on Sunday morning in their small groups, they discuss that message. They take it deeper and we build our small group questions around it. We have probably like 40 or something different small group leaders on Sunday. Well, it's not a requirement for them to be there on Wednesday night. And so the lesson on YouTube gives them a place to prep, you know, for them that weren't there on Wednesday night, which is most of them. They're able to grab that. They're able to prep that. And, you know, one last story I got for you, and this is probably the thing that might be the most successful of all the hybrid things we've tried, is we started creating a leader podcast. It's 10 to 12 minutes. It releases every single Monday. It's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the places you listen to podcasts. And it's a fantastic touch point for all of our leaders. Because you know how it is. Like you got this big leader training where you want to communicate this really important and relevant information, but like 57% of your leaders show up to said leader meeting. Yeah. So then you're like, well, dang, how do we communicate this? Or, you know, we're trying to create a culture of conversation as opposed to like teaching in our small groups. And so we just keep hammering that one little point at a time on our leader podcast. You know, we're doing this.
I think, you know, I'm a podcast guy, obviously. Yeah. We're recording a podcast right now. And I've always been kind of an audio world person, you know, by nature, and, you know, kind of some other jobs I've had and stuff. So early on, I was like, hey, we're going to have a leader podcast. And yeah, that's been a really helpful thing, you know, to your point, helpful. You know, of just putting up content like, hey, you can't make the meeting, or you have a video meeting, you just rip the audio off and upload it on YouTube and then throw it on your RSS feed. And
that's it.
It just hangs out there. And then anytime we onboard new leaders, you know, like, hey, like you need to listen to this small group 101.
Yes.
Like that's essential. Like you need to probably listen to this once a quarter, just as a reminder of like, like we're conversation. We're not talking more than X% of the time. Like, you know, that just lives on there.
Well, and it gives you,
it's great.
It gives you a rhythm of like a touch point, right? And so then it's made our leader group chat come a little more to life, because we'll share like funny stories and stuff that we do. And so people will, you know, make fun of me or my boss, my co-host on that podcast or whatever. We're doing this new like small group thing right now here the next couple weeks in December. So I just went in there and I shot a little tutorial video, and I just, you know, I cut into the middle of the already pre-recorded podcast before as I was editing it. I was like, hey, real quick, this Sunday, here's what you need to know. Here's where all this stuff is. Here's how you find this. Here's how you navigate the playlist features and stuff like that on YouTube. And I've made that video, Ryan, 1 million times for a million different things. But this time, leaders were like, Nick has communicated this so thoroughly and so well. And it's like, no, we just now have you as leaders on this regular like diet and rhythm of actually consuming this podcast weekly. And so now that I'm including these styles of videos into the actual podcast, now you're thinking I'm communicating, where I've done this stuff before, but you missed it because I emailed it and you didn't pay attention to it, or you didn't, you know what I'm saying? So like creating that discipline within them of weekly checking out the podcast. We do giveaways, you know, so it's like there's a little bit of an incentive every week to listen and tune in, see if you get a chance to win or whatever. So that's been so huge and so clutch for us.
So
honestly.
you record that leader podcast every single week.
Well, we batch record it. So we record it. Actually, I'm going in the office here in just a minute. We're going to record the next 4 in January. They're
Okay.
10 minutes. They're 10 minutes each, right? My promise to my leaders is I want you to be able to listen to this on your commute to work on Monday morning and it not take up any more time than that, right? And so we got to like give them just bite-sized little like nuggets of teaching, inspiration, whatever the case might be, bite-sized little things about, announcements. But yeah, it drops every single Monday. And so
I love
that's
that.
that's the rhythm of it, and it's helped because they've all pretty much been able to adopt it, whether they, are podcast people like you or not. We put it on YouTube in a particular playlist, like a leader podcast playlist, and then we just put it
Okay.
on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if people want to listen to it as well. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Well, I know with our last few minutes here, I did want to get into something a little, I don't want to say controversial. Um, I've had many conversations
Yeah.
with people over the years, especially since COVID, about the philosophy of online ministry.
Yeah.
Some people are very for it. They're like, it's the future. Other people are very against it. They're like,
Yeah.
hey, you don't disciple people online. You do it in person.
Yeah.
I would love to hear your thoughts. What does success look like in specifically in the space of the discipleship space of living life with each other for the purpose of helping people take their next step towards Jesus?
Yeah.
What does that look like? How would you unpack that with somebody maybe who's listening who's like, I don't know, man, I'm just skeptical. I just don't really. I think online's kind of just not biblical or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, so like one thing, it'd be so funny, man, if like you or anyone came and visited like the church I work at. Like our pastor founded this thing called Disciple First. It's a ministry that's like an offshoot division of what we do, and like our whole strategy and philosophy as a church is making disciples like Jesus, which is meeting in one-on-one or one-on-a-few like mentorship style groups. And so the way I say this, Ryan, is I think that what we learned in COVID is that the internet is really good for some things. And the things I would say the internet's really good at is content delivery, like courses, stuff like that, right? Audio podcasts like this. Anyone from anywhere around the world can listen to anyone's sermon at any time that they want. But the thing that the internet doesn't do great, it's not optimal for, is community, life on life, right? Like bearing and carrying one another's burdens. And so I think that's why I'm all about hybrid, right? And that's the thing that like as you get into it and hear like my definition, it's like it's both. It's not either or, it's both and. And so like I think discipleship best happens in person. I think though, like one thing we forget is like technology, text messaging, for example. Like text messaging didn't exist 15 years ago. So if I'm leading a small group of guys, I have an inherent advantage to my dad, who was a youth pastor in the 90s. Like if he met with guys, it was once a week at McDonald's before school, that was it. And then maybe saw them at church as well and whatever. But like my guys can be like, yo, I got a test today. Can you guys pray for me? Hey, I'm inviting my friend to church. Can you, pray for that conversation? It's going to be happening later today. Like, so that's just a small advantage that we don't even think, right? About like a piece of technology like text messaging that's absolutely revolutionized our ability to disciple people, do pastoral care, shepherding, all those things. And so I would say, here's the thing that is tough for a lot of us in ministry, like the pill to swallow is a lot of what our Sunday morning experience can be accomplished online. Like it just frankly can. You can listen to sermons really well online. Like if all I'm doing on a Sunday morning is sitting in a chair and watching someone give a like monologue style sermon, I could just as easily listen to that on a run. What can't be replaced is the community and the connection that hopefully is happening in and around that. But most of our churches have made the front door, like the number one like attraction that we're trying to get people to come into, is into a lecture style message of sorts. And that's the part that, for let's just be honest, for a lot of pastors in America, that's their bread and butter. And the thing that stinks for them is the internet has made that really possible. And so all I would say is don't be afraid of it. They where did I see? I think it's on Instagram. But the Unstuck group ran a little poll not too long ago, and they said churches that have some form of online streaming or whatever, they actually have an increase in attendance because of that, not a decrease. And so I too have heard churches who are like, we believe that you need to be doing church in person, whatever. I agree with all of that. Discipleship, I think, happens best in person. I would love and rather have relationships. I'd love to rather have this conversation with you over a cup of coffee in real life as opposed to over the internet. But man, how advantageous that you and I have this opportunity to do this while you're in Kansas City and I'm in Fort Worth, and we're able to put this together on an early Tuesday morning, before work. Like, that's kind of cool. And so
Yeah.
why would we not use technology to our advantage to enhance discipleship relationships, to enhance content delivery, information, leader podcast? You know what I mean? Like that's my kind of argument in it. I'm not arguing that it should take the place of. I'm just saying, how can it be hybrid? How can we use
and
both?
some of it, to your point, is just the impact that is there in there's optimal and minimal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like in between, digital covers a lot of bases in between.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, to the community piece, one of the things I recently started, in conjunction with this podcast, is I started a online, next gen coaching community.
Yeah.
Next gen ministry community on school. And I made it free. I'm like,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have paid communities on there, and that's great. I was like, look, I'm going to front the cost. I want that community to be free, because it's not really about like I'm going to upload some courses and stuff on there in the future, but like I'm like, I want to put this conversation on there because I want to foster conversations, and it's been fun. And our group is small right now, so this is a shameless plug for, if you're in youth ministry, get on
click
that.
The link down below. Go check it out.
Really though, like, because of the conversations, like on that platform, I had a guy that got reference from another youth pastor buddy of mine. He's across town. He just started, and he hopped in, and part of the intake is like, hey, what'd you join this for? He said, I don't know, I'm checking out. He's like, but really, like, I want to meet I need some connections in some community.
That's good.
And immediately, like, he got in there. Within 10 minutes, he and I were DMing together.
Yeah.
And he was just like, I'm really struggling in like this aspect of my ministry, like with some cultural things. And we just got into it immediately. I'm like, I've never met this guy. He doesn't live in my city.
Right.
And I'm like, what an amazing thing that, and we were just having a great, conversation over DMs about like, hey, what's going on in the ministry? What are some problems you're facing? And he's just another guy who's like, hey, I'm in the trenches. Let's get moving on these things. And, so this digital space, I'm thinking that's between youth pastor to youth pastor, and that's the whole purpose of the community. So hop in there and let's get the conversation going. But I'm even thinking like inside of your church, like, what are the opportunities
for sure,
for communities like that, for spaces where, no, parents can't always come to a parent night. I mean, we do a parent night once a semester, and it's like, hey, the attendance is not great.
Yeah.
But like what's the potential of parents getting onto an online community, a Facebook group, something like a school community, something like, another space to have some dialogue, to ask questions, to get, to share resources.
Yeah.
I mean, the digital space is limitless with those types of things.
Absolutely. And as well as I do, like, parents need more than once a semester, and they're always asking questions. So the attendance does not reflect the demand of it, right?
Or what questions are they not asking because they feel like they don't have access?
Right. Exactly.
Outside of like, I could email him, but
yeah, and they don't, and they're busy and whatever. So what if in addition to a leader podcast, you did a parent podcast, and that's a weekly 10-minute bite-sized so the sky is the limit on the type of content that we can use to help our students, parents, and leaders. And that's the thing with youth ministries. Part of what makes it so tricky is, what's one of the biggest questions at conferences and stuff like that? It's like, how do we do parent ministry? It's not that we don't know how to do parent ministry. It's that figuring out this balance of like, how often do I invest in parents versus the amount of time I'm spending in students? That's where it gets trickier. When do I do the meetings? Because I do once a semester and the attendance isn't as good as it should be. Like, and that's where digital, you'd be like, what if we thought about this in a more on-demand way than just a, cable TV style of way? So
I think that's great. And I know that I can get overwhelmed.
For sure.
And I think this would be a good place to land our conversation today. because my mind, I'm a futurist. I'm an ideation guy. I'm like, hey, anything's possible. Let's talk it out. Like, what are the million things we could do? Like, these are fun conversations for me. And then comes stress of, well, I've only got so many hours, and I'm like, we don't have a youth ministry online, digital guy, like, and that's a great blessing that your church can have you on your team like that. Especially, I'm feeling like for, my friends are at one location, solo pastor, maybe they're part-time, they're like, I'm barely even making like my large group program work
right
with my 7 volunteers,
right
let alone like how would you help them prioritize?
Sure.
And what would be some words of wisdom to say, hey, I know you can't do everything, but I would start here.
Yeah. So here's how I would recommend anyone start, right? Like, so here, our strategy, like I said, our website's up to date. We have our long form content drops once a week. And then I do 10 pieces of short form social content 2 times per day, 5 days a week. That's aggressive. And if, like you said, you're a solo guy in the middle of Nowheresville, right? Or Somewheresville, but you have your 7 volunteers and you're like, there's ain't no way. What I recommend is like, just try starting with 3, right? 3 reels, 3 shorts, 3 TikToks, whatever platform you want to use in your context. And, if you can't get a clip of your message, then just do like a recap, a selfie style recap. And that can be like one, right? One thing. The second thing that you can do is I would say, like, there's all sorts of different, like, like I said, inspirational, educational style posts or whatever. You can do that on like a reel. One of my favorite, I call it like the turtle video. I was walking in my neighborhood, I saw a turtle crossing the street. I thought that was interesting, so I got a video of the turtle, and then I posted a bunch of like text, right, of like, here are 3 prayers to pray. And a good hack for the algorithm is just post so much more text than the length of the video so that people are forced to rewatch it. So you could do like a recap of your message, even just selfie style. You could do like the turtle style video, and then do like one piece of fun content with your students or with your leaders. And the good news is, Ryan, you're like, I'm one guy, 7 leaders. I don't have the time. That's what students are for. Like, they're better than this anyway. You just got to start asking. Like, we put on our leader podcast, we gave a shout out to those 2 middle school boys who've been editing for me. And I said, yo, if anyone's interested in editing, or anyone, like, let me know. And one of the leaders said, my daughter can do it. And I was like, oh, really? And so I sent her one, like, hey, here's like one to give it a shot. Let me know what you think. And she sent it back last night, and it was fantastic. Like, I didn't coach her. I didn't, nothing. Like, she did it all on her own. And so just like we talk about this all the time with like leaders and volunteers, and our job as pastors is to equip the saints for works and acts of service. Like, the same is true. And students, they're digitally native and digitally dependent. They're probably better at this than you anyway. So give them a shot, let them try it out. And, I would say go from there, get started.
I love it. Nick, that was a lot of great content, super practical.
Yeah.
And so
Thanks,
I appreciate you breaking down a little bit of the strategy, a little bit of where to start, and just like why it's so important for us to be thinking about these things, and at least wrestling with them and thinking, we can't do everything, but what can we do?
Yeah.
So just as we close, any final words of encouragement for anybody listening, wisdom, especially in this kind of area, hybrid ministry?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you the advice that got this podcast started for me, right? Well, not this podcast, but my podcast. The advice was from my friend Matt. He said, get a microphone. Like, he's giving me these little like ancillary pieces of advice, but he's like, do you want to know my real advice? And I was like, yeah. He's like, just freaking do it. That was it. He's like, just get started, and you'll find your voice. And even, like I said, I gave this story of coming here to from Chicago to Texas, and I was like, I'm going to hone this strategy in. Like, what we started with 2 years ago is not where we have landed now. And it's not what we're going to continue to do. That's the great news about social, is like, it's always moving, it's always evolving. And so you don't have to be stuck with like one strategy forever and always. You're able to ideate, you're able to adapt, you're able to test and be like, that didn't really land. Let's try this thing instead. But you can't ever know that unless you just try and you just get started. So take the advice of my friend Matt. Just freaking do it.
Just freaking do it. I love that. Nick, I know you're in a lot of places. Obviously, you have your church online stuff.
Yep.
I think I think some people may want to go check out, listen, just check out the podcast and say, hey, I want to I'm thinking about doing the same thing. I might want to, check out a few of your episodes.
Sure.
See what you guys are doing on your social.
Yeah.
But I know you have your own show. I know you have your own ministry where you help equip leaders do all of these things too.
Yeah.
I would love for you to just kind of take a few minutes just to share about where can listeners find you if they want to get in contact with you. Again, you're listening to this, like you want to get into the weeds and strategy, ministry-wide stuff. Like, I would love to help you. I'm sure Nick would too. But like, if you're talking digital, I'm not your guy. Hit up Nick via these places.
Yeah, man. So like I said, our church, we're Cross Creek students everywhere, crosscreekstudents.com. My website for my podcast is hybridministry.xyz because of course .com was taken. It's not being used. It's just someone's trying to get rich off of it one day. And then I'm on YouTube. So you can just search Hybrid Ministry on YouTube, and all the podcasts also are video episodes as well. All sorts of different freebies and links and show notes and stuff like that. Like I've given away way too much free stuff, and so go check those things out, and you could probably cobble together anything you need and everything that you're looking for with all my different like free stuff over all the years. But I'd love to, like you said, love to help anyone out. If you're just struggling, stuck, got questions, whatever, like DMs are open, reach out. Love to help, love to chat. So
awesome.
Yeah,
Nick, thanks so much for your time, bro. This is a blessing to me, I'm sure to everyone listening. And all right, y'all. Like Nick said, you heard him. Just freaking do it.
There it is.
Thank you so much for listening and watching this episode. If it was a blessing to you, my ask is that you would share this content with a friend, someone else in leadership and in ministry. I hope it was a blessing to you, and I hope that God blesses your ministry moving forward.